Hello, and welcome back. In this episode, we're going to talk about caves. And I'm going to try something new at the end of the video. I have some real-life cave examples, some stalagmites and stalactites and stuff that I'm going to share with you. So after punching trees, exploring caves is probably the most fundamental part of playing Minecraft. Cave generation was entirely overhauled in 1.18, and while this cave here was generated with the old generation, we can go out a bit and check out the quote-unquote new cave formations and their biomes. So first up is a Lush cave. I really love this biome. It's great finding one of these when you're caving. It's just like this little oasis. Normally not many mobs spawn here because it's all lit up. But they don't really have much of an analog to real life caves. Well, most caves have life in them. Normally they're like eyeless fish and things like that need to be in the dark. The only areas where you'd find plants would be, near the surface, maybe at an opening or something like that, because they need light to grow. Some caves that are open to the public have electricity in them, and you can find, some moss or something like that growing in them. So the Lush caves also have these stepped clay pools here, and this reminds me of one of two things in real life. So first off, if a cave has standing water in it, like it has pools, you can have the growth of minerals like right along the edge, and that causes these little stepped kind of, they're called shelf stones, where they kind of just form where the water is at, and as the water level changes, then it can keep growing at these different levels. But it more reminds me of stepped travertine that can form at a thermal pool, like at a place like Yellowstone. Like travertine is a carbonate rock, like limestone. It's normally associated with volcanic activity, where the groundwater is heated by a magma chamber, and it dissolves some minerals on its way up to the surface, and then when it cools down, the minerals can precipitate from the water, and you can form ledges like this. And I like that interpretation because this area would be like nice and warm and heated from like the thermal waters coming up. Okay, we can return back and check the next one out, Dripstone caves. So sort of on the other extreme, we have Dripstone caves. They feel dark and oppressive and convey a good sense of like what it feels like to be in a real life cave. This biome contains large columns of dripstone as well as various sizes of pointed dripstone. You can also find larger blobs of copper in these biomes, and I'm not really sure why. I can't really think of anything in real life to justify this, and ores are a whole nother video topic that I'm going to cover at some other time. We will talk about the formation of caves like this a little bit later in the video, but for now I'm just going to talk about the mechanics of the pointed dripstone and dripstone blocks that were added. So the pointed dripstone blocks represent cave formations, primarily the stalactites and stalagmites. The classic way to remember this is that the stalactites hold tight to the ceiling, and the stalagmites might grow up to reach the stalactite with enough time. And below here, the actual block, the dripstone block, this could represent some type of flow stone. Normally when water is coming down over a material, like if it's not dripping from something and it's flowing over the side or edge, then it can just coat a rock, and then you get, what we have called a flow stone. There are tons of names for different types of cave formations, but the general term for all of this is speleothem, and I'll be using that for the rest of the video. So in Minecraft, if a water source is above a pointed dripstone block like this, there's a chance that the pointed dripstone will grow down, and that there's the stalagmite below it can grow up, possibly joining in the middle, like that. In real life, what is happening is that the water, rainwater, is seeping down through the rock and dissolving some minerals. When that water comes into a cave, it can evaporate and leave the minerals behind. This is a very slow process. In Minecraft, the average growth rate is, it takes about 5 game days for this block to grow once, which is about 73 meters a game year, a Minecraft year, and which blows away actual real life speleothem formation where the fastest a speleothem has been measured growing is 40 millimeters a year. So you can also use the dripstone to generate new water and lava sources by letting them drip into cauldrons. You know, the water thing is a little bit realistic, and the lava really, you know, is not. Lava would cool down if it was touching this stuff, and you'd form like little, even if it could like get through and drip like this, you'd form like little droplets of, you know, obsidian or possibly basalt or something like that. Also, there's the fact that we're technically creating new matter in this process, so we'll just ignore that violation of physics. So the last use is for the conversion of mud to clay. Great additions to the game, and it has a little bit of truth behind it. The formation of clay can involve like the leaching of some minerals from soil, like I mentioned in the dirt episode. But since we create mud from dirt in the game, it would also have organic material and other larger things like bits of quartz and stuff, and you wouldn't simply drain that out by, you know, just trying to draw water out of it. You just have dry mud, but still cool. A little bit of truth, you know, like most things in Minecraft, but I think overall good addition. Okay, and so we have one more biome to check out, and that is the deep dark. I don't have too much to say about this biome geologically. I just wanted to include it for completion's sake. Obviously, it's just a made-up biome, and I really can't think of what the skulk represents. It's kind of like a mycelium sort of thing, mushroom, but I think it has more. There's more to come for this and the ancient cities. So, you know, there's lore implications for this, but that's a different video. So we're done with the biomes, but there is one more thing to talk about. There is another type of feature that was added in 1.18, and those are noise columns. They're biome independent. So any large room, cave can have these columns, and they vary from thin to thick. Let me turn the lights on. So thin columns like single block, or you have these thicker columns that are here behind me. They're made to look like joined stalagmites, I think. That's the point, stalagmites, stalactites. But they aren't placed after the room is generated. They're just left during world generation. So they still have all the rock types that would have been there if the room was solid. So obviously there's some issues with this. You end up having ores. You can even have dirt in some of these columns. And it would have been really nice if they would have came in here afterwards, after generation, and maybe just replaced these entirely with like one rock type, so either rock or deep slate. But there's issues with having caves in deep slate, period, like geologically accurate. So, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But I do think these are a good addition. I think the caves are better to have them even the way they are, even though it's it's not accurate. Head back. So now that we've looked at the caves from the inside, I thought it would be interesting to look at the caves from the outside. This is the same area that I used in the igneous rocks video, but I added some commands that will let us fill in the caves, and then we can remove everything else. So I'm going to run a command here and then wait for it to finish. Okay, it's complete. So I'm going to remove the igneous rocks and the ores, and then we can start taking away everything else. Okay, so I think I have everything removed. We can start removing the trees and the grass. And if you're doing this at home, this can be a bit finicky. It depends a lot on the machine you're using, and I don't know, I've had some problems with it, but I'm trying to keep everything able to be done in vanilla Minecraft in this world, so your experiences may vary. Okay, so now I'm going to remove all the dirt down below, and then we can start removing the stone. Actually, I'm going to grab the map, put it in my offhand. All right, so now we can start removing the stone and we can start revealing the caves. So Mojang has 3 different names for the cave types that they added. And those are spaghetti, noodle, and cheese. I don't know why they used noodle and spaghetti. Those are both, I mean, spaghetti is a type of noodle. I would have picked 2 different noodle names maybe. Let me remove the deep slate as well. Let's see, deep slate, go. All right, so you can kind of see the shape revealed on the map. They kind of wind around. They kind of loop all over the place. They go, you know, up and down through elevation. They can all connect to each other, so they can all intersect in different spots. We have the, I think this is a spaghetti cave here. It's rather thin. And then over here we have a noodle cave. It's a bit thicker. Sometimes they'll just stop altogether. They'll just dead end. There's one down here. Yeah, there's a one here that you can see that doesn't go all the way down. It just stops. And over here we can see one of the cheese caves. So like Swiss cheese, like the big holes that are in it. And these can be really varied in size. The ones that are in this area are on the smaller size from what I've seen. But all right, I'm gonna reset the area and we can continue on our cave journey. So a word of caution, if you are using the world download, which is being provided for this one, the reset over here is particularly finicky. I'm using a structure block in a way that it really shouldn't be used, and it might crash the game. I've used it on a couple different machines. Sometimes it works just fine. Sometimes it'll crash out and only reset like half the area, and then you have to like hit the button again, and then maybe it'll crash and fill more, and you might have to do that a couple times. But I'm gonna try it and see. I recommend hitting the button and then taking your hand off the mouse until you see trees over here or your game crashes. So we'll see what we get. And it crashed. Okay, so it crashed. You can see part of it loaded and part of it didn't finish. I'm going to run it again and let it sit. I think the answer for this in the future is maybe I can divide this up, and so it does like this, like slowly, kind of like how it reveals things, that it fills it back in. It's entirely dependent on how many blocks it's replacing back to the original state. So if I just remove, you know, the trees and then reset it, it works like no problem. But I'll figure something out in the future. All right, let's head back. All right, as we go outside, we do have one more cave-like feature in the game, and that's the ravine. You can find these at any levels. They can be exposed on the surface or entirely buried. In real life, a ravine is just a narrow valley cut by a river. The Minecraft ravines tend to like narrow down on both ends, and they remind me more of like some sort of fracture that's opened up. And maybe lore-wise, this reveals something about the catastrophic history of Minecraft worlds. So commonly in real life, I think people think of 3 types of caves. And there's plenty of other types of caves, but I've made a little diorama for the big 3. First up is a karst or solution cave. These can have the speleothems in it. These are normally dissolved out of rock, and so this area would have all been stone. Normally it's limestone, possibly, well, I should say a carbonate rock like limestone, or maybe an evaporite rock, which I haven't talked about, but that's another topic. And groundwater is coming through and dissolving the rock and leaving a space. So this is where my technical issue with the deep slate caves is that slate as a rock is much harder. It has much harder durable minerals, and it's not dissolvable by a weak acid. And so you don't find solution caves in a slate environment. Okay, next we'll talk about a glacial cave. This is where you have a glacier and you have some water melting and flowing down, and then it's on top of rock. and then the water will flow along the rock, normally melting more ice, and you leave a space here and develop, a cave. Sometimes these are called, people refer to these as ice caves. Technically, that's incorrect. An ice cave is just a cave that is cold enough to form ice, and the correct term is glacial cave. We have one more to talk about, and that's a lava tube. So when there is an eruption and lava is flowing on the surface, if there's enough of it and the conditions are right, the outside of that lava flow can cool down and harden while the interior is still flowing. And so that outer shell also helps to insulate the interior, and the rest of the lava can flow out, and you leave this like open area in here. I've been in a couple lava tubes. Trying to remember. There's one in north of Flagstaff, Arizona, in the U.S. that tourists can go into. It's a really neat experience. Kind of scary though. So, like I said, there are other types of caves, but these are the big three. And karst are the most common by far in the world. And they were present where I grew up as a kid. I spent a lot of my childhood playing in the woods and in sinkholes, which are another cave formation feature. Like after a cave matures to a certain point, the roof can become weak enough that it collapses in, and then you have what's called a sinkhole forming, where things can start falling down into the cave. Probably not the safest thing for me to be doing as a kid, but it was fun. So if we go over to this area, we can learn a little bit more about how these karst caves form. And this was when I had the idea for doing this series, this was one of the first things that I thought about would be cool to do. So bounce up here. All right, so down below us, we have a village, and they have a well, and there's a stream. We can take a slice out of this ground and rise it up. And I've edited this so it's more of a simplistic version of real life, not a Minecraft slice. The stone here represents limestone, and there's a fracture represented by cobblestone. And I've added a layer of granite down at the bottom to act as our basement rock. And every place on Earth has some igneous rock underneath us at some depth. Sometimes it's from the surface all the way down to the mantle. Other places, there's lots of other rocks before we get to it. But that's another topic for another video, which there's been a lot of those this episode. So this might not be intuitive, but limestone can be saturated with water. All rocks have spaces in them, some more than others. For example, generally, sandstone has a lot, limestone has some, granite has very little. At some depth, the rocks beneath you are saturated with water, and we call that the water table. I am going to use stripped warped stems and prismarine to represent that here. You can see that the well water is the same level as the groundwater, and that's true like at a steady state, just looking at a slice. And there's a whole discipline of hydrogeology that deals with all of this stuff, groundwater and all of its interactions, that I'm not going to get into here. This is just a simplistic model about caves. The groundwater here is in equilibrium with the stream. So if the stream erodes down and the water level goes down, then the water table also will drop and equal out to the stream. This is dependent on climate and a ton of other things. And again, we're talking about geologic time. So years, decades, centuries, however long it takes. But all right, let's get back to actually talking about caves. As rain falls from the sky, it can absorb CO2 from the atmosphere, and it forms carbonic acid. It's a weak acid. And then when that rainwater soaks into the ground, it can react with the limestone. And this is dependent on a lot of things, but under the right circumstances, a cave can form. And now if the water table drops and there's still water making its way down into the cave, the water could have some of those dissolved minerals in it. It's already going through some limestone. And there's spaces in the cave that are dry. It's not underwater. And in those areas, that water can start to dry out, and we can have speleothems form. This is not true for every cave. There are plenty of caves that are entirely dry and have no speleothem formation, but this is just one case. And so as time advances, you can have more and more of the cave dissolve, and as the water level drops, this can happen lower and lower in the system. You can still have some dissolving underneath, depending on how you have water flowing underground, but oftentimes the dissolution happens near the top of the saturated area. But in the end, you can have multiple levels of cave formation happen. Sometimes the water level can go back up, and then you can get flooded caves again. We find that in some of the Dripstone caves in Minecraft have been, reflooded. Eventually, maybe the roof of a cave becomes too weak because too much of it has dissolved, and you can have a sinkhole form, and so the cave roof collapses and everything falls down into the cave, and then this stuff can be moved by water, and you can have more events that cause more sinkholes and more collapses to form. You can also dissolve all the way out to the side of a cliff or out to a stream, and then you can have access to like the cave from either the side or the top. And so I don't have a fancy way of getting rid of this. No animation. It's just gone. But behind it, back with these hills here, these actually remind me of a fully evolved karst topography. So the last stage of cave development is basically the entire cave system is collapsing, and you're left with the areas that were caves end up becoming valleys, and the high spots where the caves weren't. There's some really great examples of this in China. If you Google karst topography, you can find some really great pictures of it online. All right, so that's everything I have built to show you. If I forgot something or got something wrong, or you have questions, leave a comment and I'll get back to you. I'm providing a world download for the whole geology world for the first time. Think of it as a beta or maybe even an alpha, because there are some things that are just left incomplete, and I'm working on things, here and there. I'm not trimming the world size either yet, so it's about a 1 gig download. And when new episodes come out of the geology stuff, I will probably end up deleting the old versions online. I'll try to update the links so that it's always the most current version, but it just takes up a lot of space on my storage, and so I will try to replace it. But if you try to download this later at some other time and the link is broken, look for a newer episode, and that's probably where a real link will be at. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and like I mentioned at the beginning, I have some real life examples of speleothems to show you. And so if you don't want to mix your game and real life any more than this video already has, I'll see you next time. Otherwise, I'll be right back. So I don't really have a setup to record anything in real life yet, so this is just my phone and a temporary setup. But here's a few speleothems that I wanted to share with you. And first off, I'll say that all of these were collected for research. They are not my personal samples. They are property of the university I work at, and you really shouldn't collect these because they take a long time to grow, and they're quite special just where they're at. First off, pretty generic looking stalactite. Stalactites are normally more pointed. If I focus it at the end here, you can actually see where it started, maybe as a soda straw formation, and then it grew out mostly in this direction. And then there's like this white ring where maybe there was some environmental change in the water that caused this this different color to grow, and then the final layer outside. I don't know where most of these came from. This one specifically is labeled. It was collected in 1987 from a cenote, so probably someplace in the Yucatan Peninsula. Second is this interesting piece here. It actually broke off and it's cut into two, but if you can see the actual growth lines, this is another stalactite, so it would have been growing down this way. but you can see all the little growth layers as it was growing on. And then you can see right here, some event happened, actually broke it. So you can see how these lines truncate against it. So something broke off and then it started to grow again, and it continued to grow and have, you know, this second life that it grew on until we collected it. So for research purposes, we would take a sample like this, and we could sample points along here. We can date this. We can look at isotopic values across here and actually learn something about the environment that it grew up in. I thought this sample was pretty interesting looking. It actually looks a lot like the dripstone blocks we have in Minecraft. It's a flowstone, it's very thin, and you can still see a growth pattern in it, so you can kind of see that it was started out over here and then it grew along like this path as it grew outwards. So here's one of the most interesting ones, or my opinion is the most interesting one. And I should say that all of these, I wasn't involved with the research for any of this, and so I don't actually know where they were even collected from in some of the cases. But like in the video, in the Minecraft video, these normally grow like in a dry cave where there's no water present. It's, you know, water dripping through the cave and not something that's a cave that's flooded. But for this one, it had grown, and the inside here, you know, is probably something like a normal stalactite, but water level then, so if it's growing from this end, you know, it's growing down this way and then in a dry cave, and then water level came back up, and then all of these calcite crystals here grew on the edge of the stalactite. So kind of like rock candy. If you grow that, like, you know, on a stick in your kitchen, it's kind of like that, where all these crystals grew. And then some other point, water level went back down, and then, you know, we were able to come back and sample it. Those are the samples I'm sharing this time. I might do this more in other videos for other things. But I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time. Bye.